Two. All right, welcome to episode 59 of the Breaking Balls podcast. We're here in the middle of the week because, well, we've got plenty to talk about this weekend. Full weekend of racing for Memorial Day, F1, IndyCar, NASCAR. Take your pick, Bob.
Well, big weekend, especially Coke 600 and Indy 500 stateside. So we figured we bring on a guest for the second time this weekend, Mr. Evan Lachnit. A lot to break down this weekend. Of course, it's Memorial Day. Hope you're sitting by the pool watching some racing this weekend.
Flags in the air. Boogity, boogity, boogity. Ooh, let's go racing, boys.
All right, everybody. Episode 59 of the Breaking Balls podcast. We are here on a Thursday. We're back to our roots here, and midweek because, of course, if you're in America, so this is probably the biggest weekend as far as motorsports is considered. So had to bring up the big guns. But, again, nice to see you on a Thursday, my friend.
Absolutely, Bob. We used to kind of force our way through 2 shows a week. Now we're just once. But, you know, when there's enough to talk about, there's enough to talk about. And there's even enough room to bring a nice friend along, Bob. So why don't you intro our favorite guest?
Well, if you've listened to our NASCAR post-season recap last year, you've known him. He was our first guest, and he is now our first recurring guest, friend of the podcast, Mr. Evan Lachnit. Evan, welcome back to the hot seat here at Breaking Balls.
I appreciate you guys having me on. Had a great time back in November, and excited to chop it up. We've got 1,100 miles of racing to talk about on Sunday.
No, it's a marathon of a day from Monaco early in the morning, IndyCar midday, kind of your lunch, and then you go Coke 600 at night. And Coke finishes off the night. It's kind of fitting there. So, obviously this is a NASCAR podcast, but
I'll say this, Bob. You've kind of set that up perfectly because if F1's breakfast, I usually don't eat breakfast. So I don't know how much F1 you're going to get me to talk on this. And after my encounter with F1 in Europe, I don't think I'm very interested in talking. So should we just skip to lunch?
We can. Obviously, it looks like it's going to be a Red Bull weekend. Qualifying is the only thing that really matters at Monaco. So watch that on Saturday. You'll probably catch the highlights on Sunday there. But no bones about it. I don't think you and I are IndyCar experts here by any stretch of the means. Casual fans here. We like to see Roman Grosjean come close, but never, finish off these races. So we figured we'll bring in as close to the expert as we can afford here at Breaking Balls. And Evan, you were the one that made the call and made the answer on the Rolodex. So I know you kind of talked about it back in November, but I'd say you're an IndyCar encyclopedia, maybe, or at least when it comes to the 500, you're at least well rounded there.
I would say the 500 it's my favorite event of the year. Been going since the 100th running. My dad started going in 1988, and he was at every Indy 500 up until the pandemic year when there were no fans. And so I have no bones about it. My girlfriend's birthday, and I'm going to be more than girlfriend in the future, and it's May 24th, and I'm like, look, all I'm saying is there's going to be like once every 6 years. Your birthday's going to have to be celebrated a couple days early because I swear to God, as long as fans are allowed at that frickin' place, I am not missing an Indy 500. So, it'll be looking forward to 20. I was thinking today, I'm looking forward to 2028. It'll be 40 years that a Lachnit's been there. 2023, we're 35 years in, but excited to be there this Sunday. It's like I said, it's one of those things you have to experience. And I've been to NASCAR races before, and they're great. But there's nothing like walking into that place on race day, and it's an explosion. It's like a motorsports orgasm. It smells like racing. It looks like racing. And there's every color you can imagine. When you look in, the sky's blue, the grass is green, the track is black, the wall is white. Everyone in the stands has a different colored shirt on. It's sensory overload, and it's awesome. And just being there and seeing the corporate folks all the way down to the snake pit folks, it's quite the ordeal.
Yeah,
it's got something for everyone there.
Oh yeah, I'll tell you what. Yeah, there's the youngins in the snake pit. people younger than me, my age, younger. I'm one of the probably few people my age, our age, that is sitting in the stands, listening to the scanner, talk the old guys about the 88 race and the 72 race and how today's like that race. But yeah, there is something for everybody at that race. And it's just, they call it the greatest spectacle. And I'll tell you what, whether you think it's the greatest or not, it is a damn spectacle.
Well, a little known fact here on the podcast is that before I ever really was into NASCAR, the first motorsport I watched was IndyCar. So my grandpa would take me to Long Beach every year. We would go watch the Grand Prix, have a great time doing that. And just to think of, like you said, I think the cool part about IndyCar is that, like, just that ambiance. You're right. It feels like racing, even in Long Beach, which doesn't have any of the history, or it has a little bit, but nothing compared to Indy. And it's just like I can't quite wrap my head around why that experience at an IndyCar race is so different from any other motorsport.
Well, and that's, I mean, Long Beach, I mean, that's still one of, like, the most, like, historic on the IndyCar calendar wise, and even Indy 500. Your families have gone in the past, and it feels like once you go once, families keep going back. Mm-hmm. It becomes a traditional thing. Evan, especially, like you said, 35 years now for your family with the Indy 500. What makes IndyCar something that is a tradition? You have to go every year, because a lot of times, you can go every couple of years or now and then. What makes it to where you have to be at the Indy 500 every year?
I think the great thing is it's the race itself. It is, when I think about it, it's up there with the 24 Hours of Le Mans as the most grueling races out there. No offense to other endurance races. And there's something about just the speed, the death that's happened there. I mean, thank God no one's died in recent years and about the last 20 years. But, it's one of those things where still, like, open wheel cars, the open cockpit, but I'm glad they have the aero screen now, because it has probably saved a couple guys' asses a couple times already. But there's just something about, like, the danger there is palatable. And seeing, on qualifying weekend, going 243 miles an hour, you're not getting that anywhere else. And, the Daytona 500 is great, but when you win the Indy 500, unless it's rare one every 30 years fuel race, you actually won the race. You had the best car. You did the best driving. You didn't spin somebody out to win. You didn't get lucky because of a caution. You won because you were the best driver that day. And I think there's something about that. And all the old geezers that go, what was different back in the day was us three would show up with 3 different cars. There were no specs, nothing. Like, you showed up and, Bobby has a wing. I don't have a wing. Adam has this wing that goes up to heaven, and they all 3 go, incredibly fast. And it's one of those things where I think that the innovation of it is sparked people, but still today you can't beat speed. And nowhere else in the world do you have cars going 243 miles per hour into turn 1 or 3, depending on where the wind's blowing.
You've got speed on the track and off the track, because obviously the snake pit is moving at a pace too. I mean, I would love to see Adam. I would love to see you down there in the snake pit. I gotta say, I feel like you would thrive in that environment.
It feels like, obviously not really having an understanding because I haven't been, but if I were. It seems like it rivals the Boulevard at Talladega. It's from all stories that I have heard, this feels like the place to be this weekend. I mean, especially,
and my dad's friends,
so many people.
I was just gonna say, my dad's friends would tell you too what it is today. Back in the 80s, overdrive.
Oh.
Police showing up, handing out bags of substances for the crowd that they confiscated from teenagers, just absolutely insanity, like RV orgies, like, just everything you expect at a Memorial Day cookout.
When 1 in 1,000 Americans on average are there, I mean, you're gonna get some stories. Obviously, you're gonna get a time there. As far as the actual race, though, because Evan, like you said, you can't beat speed. Obviously, the whole lore on and off track is special with Indy, but the race itself is what draws everyone there every year and brings them back. Me and Ad, we're IndyCar casual, as I'd say. Is that a good word for us, Ad casuals?
Yeah, I would even, if there was a step below casual, that would probably be me. I'm a big Long Beach and Indy 500 guy, and that's probably it. But it's getting better. It is getting better.
Well,
I'll say that.
I don't want to speak for our listeners here, but we are a predominantly NASCAR podcast here, Evan. So some of them are picking up, some of them are understanding what's going on here. But just a crash course here on the Indy 500. We figured, anybody knows it, it's you, my friend. So a couple of storylines maybe that some people are kind of overlooking this weekend, some favorites. Just a general idea of the race here for somebody who maybe this is their first Indy 500 watching.
Yes, I mean, there's storylines abound. I mean, even starting with the fact that the man who was bumped from the race, Graham Rahal, is going to be in the race driving a Chevy. He's a Honda man, which for some people, I don't think they understand what big of a deal that is. But kind of like when people talked about Kyle Busch going from Toyota to Chevy, this is the same thing, but Graham Rahal on a one-off is going to hop in a Chevy because his car was bumped from the field by his own teammate, who is probably lucky to have a job and might have been fired automatically if he wouldn't have bumped his way into the field on Jack Harvey. So that's the initial storyline right there. Really feel bad for Stephen Wilson. Races in honor of his brother Justin, who died in the mid-2000s after being hit in the head with a piece of debris at Pocono. Broke one of his vertebrae. Looked like an innocent crash, but directly head on Monday practice. So really tough for Stefan. One race a year, put together a really good program, qualified decently. So it sucks for Stefan, but Graham Rahal hopping in that car, in a car that's better than his car that he actually drives, is an interesting storyline. You have Scott Dixon, who is the greatest IndyCar driver of this generation and arguably a top 5 American series driver of all time. He has only won one Indy 500. He's come painfully close multiple times. 2020, just in the last couple of years, 2020 got passed on lap 5 with 5 laps to go. Caution comes out with 3 laps to go. Race ends under caution. Last year, dominated the race. Absolutely class of the field. 1 mile per hour over on his last pit stop. Skid the brakes just a little too hard at the timeline. So you have arguably, like I said, it's AJ Foyt, Mario Andretti, and probably Scott Dixon in the list of greatest IndyCar drivers of all time. And then you have the renaissance of AJ Foyt racing. AJ will put a boot in your ass, but the last 15 years, his cars couldn't, cut the mustard. The best AJ Foyt story is when he fired his grandson after qualifying for the Indy 500 and called him a dead ass.
That is something Adam would do. I could see Adam doing that. It's tough.
That is something that I would. Yeah, me and Richard Childress are very good at abandoning one grandchild.
Hey, I'll tell you, AJ Foyt, man, and then AJ Foyt the fourth, he was in the Truck Series faster than I've ever seen anyone in the Truck Series. But AJ Foyt, he has 2 cars that qualified in the top 12. Santino Ferrucci, who's my personal favorite driver, full-time ride this year with AJ, and he's got a car that can win this race. And if the 14, and it's got a patriotic paint scheme on this Memorial Day weekend, if he could end up in victory lane, there will be some shirts off, including mine, which no one wants. So you probably want to, if you're going to be there in section 109, you're probably rooting against Santino. But it's funny, on qualifying weekend, I'm watching it, and my girlfriend's kind of getting into it a little bit, and she's like, Santino Ferrucci's from Connecticut? She was like, I would have never guessed that man's from Connecticut. And then she saw his hair.
What are you talking about?
Like, kind of
with a last name like Ferrucci, he has to be from Connecticut. If he's from the United States, it's gonna be Connecticut. It's true. There's so many Italians in Connecticut. Ferrucci blood's in there.
I gotta be honest here. Whenever I hear Santino Ferrucci on the broadcast, I think of Santino from the WWE. I think of Santino Marella. I just have to get that off my chest here.
Well,
hey,
Santino's
that's intercontinental champion Santino Marella to you.
And that is why we podcast together.
Santino's an interesting story too. He was in F2 and got kicked out of F2 for being a brat, and apparently might have punched one of his teammates, and he was ostracized from the Formula One community. He came to America and is just bad fast on ovals, and he's kind of known as the ringer. Last year, he didn't have a full-time ride, but anytime someone couldn't drive, he hopped in the car and finished top 10. He's an unreal talent. Dale Jr. loves him, which is good enough for me. And he's never finished outside the top 10 in the Indy 500. He started 4 times and started in the top 10 every time. This year, he'll be starting 4th. His best career start before that's 15th. So watch out for him. And I think the final thing is you have 2 teams that are the class of the field. Penske this year, and ever since the new car that came out, they haven't been as good at Indy. Pagano won in 2019, Power won in 2018, 2020, new chassis. They haven't been as good. You have 3 obviously talented drivers, 1 a former Indy champion in Will Power, and Joseph Newgarden's been close a couple times, but really never with Penske. His closest was when he was still with Sarah Fisher Hartman Racing, or Ed Carpenter Racing, whoever he was with at the time. They all got together and had a team, unification process. So you have that, but you have the McLarens and you have the Ganassis, and you have 8 drivers that are all superstars. In Ganassi, you have 3 champions of the Indy 500. Takuma Sato, a 2-time champion. Marcus Ericsson, the defending champion. And then Scott Dixon, the aforementioned Scott Dixon. And then on top of that, you have Alex Palou, who has finished in the top 5 the last 2 years and had a great rookie campaign in 2020. He's the class of the field. By far, I think, has the best chance to win because he's due. But then in McLaren, you have some dogs. You got Alexander Rossi, who no one is more exciting than Alexander Rossi. He will pass 3 cars on the outside on a dirty track just because he can. Tony Kanaan, a fan favorite, is also in a McLaren. His last year at the Indy 500, from Brazil, but he might as well be from Indianapolis the way they treat him there. And then you have 2 guys that I think really have a really good chance to win this race, and Pato Award and Felix Rosenqvist. Shout out to Felix Rosenqvist. A guy who got bumped out of Ganassi for Alex Palou, and frankly, he probably has the second best car in this field. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the team dynamics play out, because you're going to have probably 8 of the top 12 cars be from 2 teams.
I guess my question is, as a casual fan, what do you think benefits a driver at a track like Indianapolis more? Just kind of having the experience of running the race and kind of being at those high speeds because it's such a unique oval, and you just have to be completely fearless behind the wheel. So do you think would be better off to have kind of like a killer mentality as far as a driver just going out there and being fearless, or would you rather have, I guess the question is, car or driver, what's more important at the Indy 500? I'll spit it out eventually, I promise.
I still think the driver, because when it comes down to it, you're going to have 12 cars this year that probably can win this race. If it's a normal race, fuel doesn't become, it's not there's like the one-off where it's a fuel race. Alexander Rossi benefited from that in 2016, the 100th running. He came coasting across the line at 120 miles per hour, but he had a full lap lead on the field because he didn't have to make a final pit stop. So I still think it's the driver, because at the end of the day, you're going to have 8 to 12 cars that are just badass, and they're going to have a chance to win this race. And it's probably even larger than that. You probably could bump it up to 15, because some of the drivers Joseph Newgarden can squeak out, if his car is a 7th place car, he can get a 2nd place finish because he's Joseph Newgarden, that kind of thing. So I still think I went the driver, because at the end of the day, like, the cream of the crop rises to the top. There's a reason certain guys finish in the top 5 consistently at Indy. Dan Weldon drove in cars that were never the best, other than in 2005 and 2006. He finished 2nd twice in 2009, 2010, and then won in 2011 in 2nd-rate cars. There's a reason that it is. Those cars were not Ganassi cars. They weren't Penske at the time. They weren't Andretti. But he found a way to be there at the end and benefited from it. In 2011, when J.R. Hildebrand hit the wall on the last turn, he scoots by. His final win ever in IndyCar, Indy 500, tragically dies a few months later in Las Vegas. But that's why I still think you want the driver, and that's why they're, and it doesn't, experience matters, but like there's just dudes that get off the hauler and they're just dogs there. Alex Palou only has 3 starts, but he's a dog. He's a dog. Pardon me. He's a dog. Like the dude he can drive
Woof.
there. Yeah, damn straight. And he's Spanish, so vamos Alex. But yeah, I think that
I gotta say,
some dudes just have it.
If Newgarden wins, though, if Newgarden wins on Sunday, I'm going to Hindernville City Hall, and I am absolutely downing a gallon of milk right in front of the City Hall. So we're christening the city because he hasn't won. If I'm wrong here, I think that's Newgarden's one thing he's missing in his career is the Indy 500 crown, right?
100%. 2-time champion, won dozens of probably about 2 dozen races, something like that. I mean, the guy's he's a through and through champion, and this is the one thing he's missing. And that's the crazy thing with this field. 9 of the 33 drivers are past champions. That's a high number for this race. And I would say of those 9, a majority of them have a legit chance to win. The one who might have the worst chance is Elio.
Oh, that's tough to hear because I know that as far as Indy fan favorites, everyone loves that man. I mean, he is Mr. Indianapolis. I mean, I think that goes without being said. There, even from somebody that maybe doesn't watch IndyCar a lot, that man is dominant there over time. But I guess my question is, because me and Adam have been known to throw a little money down here and there. If I said, Evan, I have $100 bill, I'm going to Las Vegas tomorrow, and I'm trusting in your guidance here, who would you take this weekend? I know it's such a crapshoot. Like you said, a couple of different guys. It seems like there's a couple of different teams that are involved here, but who's the Lachnit faith in this weekend?
So if you're looking to just get a win under your belt, maybe you've had a tough late spring. Maybe you've been betting on like Hofstra college baseball. Maybe you're just in a degenerate state. You just want to win. I think your money goes on Alex Palou. I think he has the best chance to win this race. He's starting on pole. He has been close the last 2 years. I think you gotta say that he is the person that has the best chance to win. Now, if you're looking to maybe make a little money, I think someone you got to look at is Tony Kanaan. Tony Kanaan is fearless. He finished 3rd last year. He's starting in the top 10. I think he's got a really good chance to be up there at the front when the money is on the line. So if you're looking for like a dark horse, like I said, Tony, and that's a dark horse in the sense that he's not going to be in the top 5 favorites. So you're still going to get better odds than half the field with Tony Kanaan. If you like horse racing, sometimes you go for the trifecta. If maybe you're doing a little money on the Preakness last weekend, you can do that for racing. I think a really interesting, whatever you want to call it, 3. You want the 3 numbers on the horses. If you want 3 drivers, I think if you lay down Felix Rosenqvist, Palou, and I'm gonna take Tony off this, but I think Ferrucci has a really good chance to be up there as well, and that's me fangirling a little bit, but I think if you take the 6, the 10, and the 14, you got a pretty damn good chance of at least one of those guys winning the race, which will get you a nice little bit there. So, and if you want a real dark horse, like someone that is probably not thought of this year as someone that can win, is Colton Herta. I think he can wheel that car around, even if it's not the best, but I'm just not trusting in Andretti. But there's so many guys. Like Takuma Sato is another guy, fearless. He will put that car where no one else wants to put it. Maybe that's what wins him his 3rd Indy 5. Like, there's just so many guys that have quality equipment now, and the parity in this racing series is up there with the best of them. It's up there with NASCAR, and in fact, I think it's even got a little more parity than NASCAR right now. So, it's tough, but like I said, Palou, I like Kanaan. It's his last race. I think he's going to leave it all on the line. And I think, Felix Rosenqvist and Ferrucci are 2 other guys that are going to start at the front. And starting at the front helps. It's one of those races.
Evan, I only have $100, so I'm going to go with Pillow there just to be safe. I'm not a rich man here, so I'm just going to stick with Alex Pillow and be safe on that. I do want to touch on something you mentioned, though. You said Tony Kanaan is last Indy 500 here. I've seen some rumors. Is this Tony Kanaan's last Indy 500 like it was Eric Almirola's last season last year, where everyone's saying it is, but really we're coming back here and we'll see him next year.
If Arrow McLaren, if Penske would never do it, but if Arrow McLaren, if Andretti, if Ganassi ever wanted a fifth car in the race, they'd call Tony. I mean, it's just that simple. The man could drive at that track. And it's one of those things where some guys have bad luck. He's had bad luck, but he won one, which was awesome in 2013, but he can wheel it. And, I mean, the thing about him and Elio and some of these guys that are racing in their late 40s, it's no offense to Ryan Newman, no offense to, some of these older guys in NASCAR. I can't even think of one now that's trying to come back. They're in the best. I mean, they bike, they run triathlons. Like, these dudes, they're not out of shape. They can hop in these cars. It's not like, oh, Tony Stewart's going to try it. Like, it's not like that. So, yeah, I don't know if it's going to be his last. I kind of hope it isn't, because he's a beloved son, but it might be. And if it is, cheers to a tremendous career and someone that, I think him and Elio, Connor Daly, in the last 20 years, Ed Carpenter, because Ed Carpenter and Connor are locals. But, you got two locals and then two kids from Brazil that are now old
Connor
men.
Daly, like the guy that drove at Coda? He's an IndyCar driver? I thought he was a NASCAR back charter.
I honestly thought he just podcasted for Dale Jr.
And I'll tell you what, the loudest cheer, unless Elio or Tony win that race, the loudest cheer on Sunday will be if Connor Daly takes the lead. Bar none.
Interesting. Adam, this time next year, we are going to be talking about Kyle Larson in the Indy 500. I'm excited about that as well. I mean, we're NASCAR boys are infiltrating Indy. It's about time. It's been a while.
We've been saying this for a long time, Bob, but I largely consider Kyle Larson to be the best race car driver in the world. And I am just so excited to see what he looks like behind the wheel of an Indy car going roughly 240 miles an hour. I'm so curious to see how it translates. I'm so glad that they seem to be doing it right, giving him sim time, giving him time at the track to really get used to the car, such that I think he may even be a little bit competitive. But obviously, like Evan just brought us through, it's such a competitive field that this is not I don't think it's just going to be as easy as a jump as we're all making it out to be, but it is still Kyle Larson who's the best race car driver in the world. What do you think, Evan?
Here's the thing. If this was in the old Aero package where you could easily follow, and I love Fernando Alonso. He's one of my original loves in racing. He benefited from that in his Indy 500 where he was super competitive and his engine crapped out. He benefited from having a good car and being able to closely follow. These new cars, actually, I think benefit Kyle Larson more. It's harder to drive in traffic. It's slippery. You're wrangling it a little bit more. I think he actually would do worse in the old car where it was easier to drive, because when it's easier to drive, that levels the playing field a little bit. With these cars now, it's harder to drive, and I think Kyle Larson is the cream of the crop when it comes to wheeling a car. I mean, there's just no denying that. He is one of the best wheelers of a car out there, and you see that when he wins every dirt race he enters. So I will say, as long as McLaren's equipment is steady, I guarantee he'll finish in the top 10 next year. I guarantee it. I'm that confident in him. If Kurt Busch could hop in an IndyCar and finish 6th, Kyle Larson can win the race.
Well, I would love to see Ross Chastain in IndyCar just to see if, the field would survive an entire race.
Going back to it, open wheel racing is still more dangerous than that. We can't afford to have Ross running into the back of people. It doesn't work like that. You can't use your front wing to turn the guy. It just doesn't. You couldn't crash your IndyCar into the wall at Martinsville and hope to make it around. Okay, you couldn't Hail Melon it. It's just.
I just have a hilarious
Hail Melon at
image.
Indy.
I have a hilarious image in my head right now of Indy cars running in Martinsville, by the way, of just the most frustrating race ever.
That would be horrendous. If they're going to do
It
that,
would be
strip
so
the wings
awful.
off the cars and run them like 60s Formula One cars. No wings. Just go out there
No
and
wings.
have fun, you know? What's interesting about that Kyle Larson
Oh.
ride, though, with McLaren, Kyle Busch was this close to doing it, and then Kyle Larson came around. And so I'll tell you, if Kyle Busch could get a ride with Kyle's in the Indy 500, that is a wet dream. It's as simple as that. I mean, and honestly, Kurt Busch says he's getting close to being healthy. I'd love to see him try again. Of all the NASCAR guys that I would like to see jump in a car, Kyle Larson's number one, obviously. Kyle Busch is up there. I think Christopher Bell would be a tremendous driver at Indy. Basically, anyone that's got dirt experience, that's going to be helpful. So, a guy like, like William Byron, who's a sim racer guy, I don't think he could do it.
Are you telling me that Ricky Stenhouse is going to do the 2027 double?
No.
Because I am going to go ahead and prep for that and get my travel arrangements in order. I will see y'all
I'll
in
be
2027 in a few years.
You know who also would be good is Chase Briscoe. Chase Briscoe would be, I think, good at Indy.
Am I allowed to say Cody Ware since he's done IndyCar before? Am I allowed? Never mind. Oh, anyway, we're through lunch, and we might have just thrown up a little bit after lunch there. I'm so sorry. At this point in the day, it's about 5 o'clock on the East Coast. He's if he gets out, he might have a chance here. Obviously we're through lunch here. Yeah, we're through Monaco. We're through Indianapolis. Now the real marathon is the night race, because the Coke 600, obviously, it's the longest race of the year in North America as far as NASCAR is considered. I mean, Adam, I'm sure you remember last year because it was, obviously a Memorial Day to remember, but Denny Hamlin was the one that outdueled everyone and just, a chaotic ending there. Are you gonna be able to make it through all? What is it, 400 laps? Are we gonna eyes on all 400 here?
I'm not going to lie to you. 600 miles of just about anything seems like it's out of my range. But I will hang in. I think I'm gonna have to get some coffee. Kind of keep myself up. But no, I'm actually excited for this one, Bob. Like you said, Denny last year kind of won a chaotic race. I mean, I'm pretty sure honestly, it's coming back to me now. The 10-lap red flag for Christopher Buescher flipping. All sorts of weird things went on in this race last year. So I'm just excited to kind of strap in. And I just think that my life is exponentially better when there's racing on TV. So it's just one of those things where it's the best thing to have on throughout the day. And this is our day, like Sunday. And just to kind of lead into the Coke 600, it's just, I don't know, man. This feels like one of the more American weekends out there, strictly because of the combination of Memorial Day and racing and how good of a job NASCAR does interplaying the two.
And you got the pageantry, like you said, Memorial Day weekend. Obviously, all the different patriotic schemes. I didn't realize, but apparently this is one of the biggest activation weekends the U.S. military has as far as sponsorship-wise, is the NASCAR race, the Coke 600. So a lot of, funds are poured into the marketing here. Obviously, it's a big remembrance weekend, and NASCAR does a great job combining that. Realistically, it's pretty much the only endurance race that NASCAR has as well.
Yeah, and not only that.
Go ahead, Adam. I'm so sorry.
No worries. Sorry. I think just the way that the brands within the sport, like Goodyear, is doing something with the tire in order to honor Memorial Day, and then Sunoco has. They are using their sponsorship spot on the checkered flag to include a Memorial Day tribute. It's just the way that everybody buys into the weekend. I really think it's one of the most, in George Bush's America, this used to happen every weekend. I think now with where our country is headed as far as patriotism goes, you don't get weekends like this very often. So it's good to
you gotta come out to Mid-Missouri.
It's good to kind of Dude, LA is a depressing place for America.
I'll tell you what, the Lake of the Ozarks, it is George Bush's America every weekend, let me tell you.
Beautiful, beautiful Branson, Missouri, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, man. Hit the outlet mall.
But the one thing about this race, though, is when the track is on, and there was, the last couple years, the Charlotte Motor Speedway, they brought the Roval in because the track hadn't been producing like they wanted to after the repave. Feels like last year with the next gen car, they hit on something with these 1.5 miles, and Charlotte was no exception. This was one of the best races of the year. And when you have a 600-mile race, it's hard to keep fans entertained, but it felt like last year, the entire time, the racing was great. And Evan, I'm just curious, can we expect the same thing this year, Nostradamus Evan? I mean, is the next gen car going to produce like last year, or are we going to be more of the short track snooze and the super speedway snoozing that we've had to start the year?
Was Kansas a good race? Then,
Oh, buddy, was it?
Charlotte's going to be a good race. I mean, that's my best. It's hard to say because the short tracks are awful. I mean, that's something that's got to be addressed. The short track racing is supposed to be kind of the premier racing of NASCAR because you can put your bumper, boys will be boys type of thing. It just hasn't been that. And the super speedways, I'm lukewarm on super speedway racing most of the time because it's just as fun as it can be. No one wants to be sitting there at 4:45 and know with 3 laps to go, I'm busy till 6. Like that's a tough thing. But when it comes to the 1.5 miles, I think they've hit. I think that is been great. I think it's interesting that, of course, they finally get a car that's good on the 1.5 miles against. And what have they started doing? Moving away from 1.5 miles, which, hey, they can't help. They needed to change it up. They had to. But frankly, they need to get rid of the Roval. They need to race on this track at night twice a year. It's good racing, and it should produce. And I think with 600 miles, the great thing is you sent me that audio today from Bobby or from Kyle Larson. Bobby, last year he was awful in the first 100 laps, and he had 300 laps to turn it around, and he did. And it's one of those things where when you race 600 miles, there's time, you can get a couple lucky dogs and still end up at the front of the field. So I think they did hit on something. And I think the great thing is the Coke 600 always it's a mixture of endurance, the car and the driver. It's a mixture of fuel saving, and it's, tire wear and who can do the best to manage their tires. And I think it's a great combination. And these new cars, I think, really help exploit those things that make this a great race.
And you touched on it, and I think it's going to be massively important is what is the tire going to look like that Goodyear brings? I think that's honestly, as a NASCAR fan, one of the weirder questions you have to ask every week is what's this tire going to wear like, or what's it going to look like with a few laps on it, because nobody ever knows. So, but yeah, I think you touched on it. I'm sad to see that NASCAR has finally found a packager in the next gen car that can really perform at these 1.5 miles. But then, it sucks because it's like you look at the schedule and Kentucky's gone. And, even a place like Iowa's gone. I think Iowa would be a cool place I want them to get Iowa back on that fucking schedule so badly, for the record. Hand up. But, I know that's not 1.5 miles. I don't care. But I just... There are so many tracks that NASCAR has gone away from that I fucking hate, and the fact that you just gave me even a little bit of a tangent point for it made me very happy. So I'm going to shut up now.
No, it's fair. I mean, you get away from the tracks. I believe Robin Scherbatsky said it in How I Met Your Mother. Timing's a bitch, and it kind of feels like it right now, where NASCAR was so good with these short tracks of the super speedways with the last gen car, and the 1.5 miles were kind of snoozers, and 2 years later, we have literally done a 180 here, y'all. I mean, it makes no sense.
The biggest problem is these 1.5 miles were built in the heyday of NASCAR, the early 2000s. That's when Las Vegas popped up, Chicagoland, Kentucky. They added all these tracks that were 1.5 miles, and it got stale eventually, and people stopped going. And I think even more so than the racing, it was the fact that they just weren't economically profitable. We spent some time talking about IndyCar. IndyCar's grassroots, the Champ Car and Kart were always road course centric. But when IndyCar started in 1996, it was an all oval schedule. They raced at Charlotte. They raced at Las Vegas. They raced at Atlanta. They raced at all those places. And through time, it became more of they incorporated road courses and more. And then now it's hard to find an oval that not only is competitive to race at, but people will show up to watch racing. And it's one of those things where that's why NASCAR is going to do some stupid street race in Chicago. It's hard to tell someone travel all this way to come sit in the heat, watch cars go in a circle for 400 miles, and that's all you get to do. And that's what is killing mile and a half racing. I'm willing to do it, but a lot of people aren't, and I don't blame them with how expensive it is to travel and stuff. It's not just like hop in the car and take the family in the minivan to Kansas Motor Speedway if you live in, you know, Detroit, Michigan. That's not easy. So you got to give me more than just one race on Sunday that is, going to be a thing. And that's what IndyCar struggle with. And I think that's what NASCAR has struggled with to a point is, you need more. And it's a shame because it has nothing to do with the racing.
No, I agree. And I think, even when NASCAR does kind of dip their toe into a little bit of pageantry, as we've seen in the past 2 weeks with Darlington and then North Wilkesboro, they do a really good job with it. And then this week, obviously, with the concerts and stuff going on with the race, they seem to be getting it. They seem to understand that it can't just be racing, period. It has to be racing, comma, and then another event. Like you have to make it such that the time that people are spending at these events are worthwhile, whether there's racing on the track or concerts off of it. It just has to be entertaining. And I think that's how you get growth and interest into the sport. And that's one of the things that IndyCar, I think, does so well with the snake pit. You could buy a ticket to the race. You could pay extra money to go sit in the snake pit. It's up to you. I think NASCAR could learn a lesson or two from it.
And even North Wilkesboro. I mean, obviously, that's going to be a little bit different because of the environment and where it's at. But, you had on Sunday, they made sure fans got there early. One, because it was going to be traffic issues, but they had a Dierks Bentley concert, I think, 4 hours before the race started. It's not even a pre-race concert at that point. It's just come out, you've got things to do before the events even start. So you don't have to pick one or the other. There's a lead up to the race. And some weekends you get that. Obviously, different markets, it's going to be a little bit easier. But yeah, I mean, you look at the LA market, it was easy to do the Coliseum because you're right downtown. How hard is it for a family of four to go out to Fontana? That's probably a lot more of a hassle.
Yeah, Fontucky is called Fontucky for a reason. It's because it's out there off the freeway that nobody ever goes out there. I mean, the Inland Empire is just that. It's an expanse of an empire of a bunch of places that nobody really wants to be. And as much as you want to, the real estate was worth what it was worth because it's sitting in California, and there's always this idea that somehow the Inland Empire can be LA or Orange County, but you're right, Bob. It just doesn't make sense because you go out there, you're in the middle of the Get High Desert, watching people go around in circles for a few hours doing that. Like there's just no entertainment value added to Fontana that even me as a racing fan, there's a reason my grandpa used to take me to Fontana, but once he passed, there was really no reason for me to keep going because I was more so going just to kind of hang out with my grandpa and that type of thing and not really, the race was kind of like, whatever. But, I just think the more they go towards doing entertainment and racing, I think the better off that the health of the sport is going to be overall.
I think you're starting to see it. NASCAR's finally starting to adapt, but it's definitely something that they've got to keep on the horizon. You see IndyCar with Iowa, not only the track reviving because of the racing, but they bring in multiple headline shows on Saturday and Sunday for that doubleheader race. You've got to have a reason for fans to come out, not just because of the race fans. You want your brother to come. You want your girlfriend to come. You want your friends to come that maybe aren't just diehard race fans, but it gives them a reason. You've got them around the track already.
My girlfriend
who really could give...
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Evan. You're good. You're the guest. You're the guest, pal. Keep going.
My girlfriend, who really could care less about racing, I like to think that I'm changing the tide a little bit with it. But she ended up having a bachelorette party that weekend. But we were going to go up to Iowa. Kenny Chesney, Carrie Underwood, Zach Brown Band, Ed Sheeran. 2 races. You get a ticket for all 6 of those events for like $200. I mean,
that event also creates a very it creates a very fun game of one of these things is not like the other, though. I will say
yes,
that.
It does.
With the musical artists.
Yes.
I wonder how many.
You're not going to see Ed Sheeran at Darlington.
No.
Even next weekend when NASCAR goes to Gateway, Dierks Bentley is coming to the Ozark Amphitheater here in mid-Missouri. in July. I think it's $100. I can go to the race at Gateway for $80 and see the Dierks Bentley concert. I mean, that's
No, it's a no brainer.
and you
there.
know what too? Last year, all my buddies went. Girlfriends came because Old Dominion was playing after the race. And then too, you know what? After the race, 2 of the 4 girls were like, "I think I'd come back and watch this," and they weren't talking about the concert. I always tell people, they say, "I don't get racing. I don't like it. It's boring." I say, go to a race. Just go. I don't care where, what kind of car. Go to a race and stand by the track. I guarantee you will leave with a smile on your face. Guaranteed.
That's the whole thing, is just getting them to the track, getting people to the track that wouldn't necessarily be there. Go ahead, Ad. Sorry.
I will say this. I mean, if there was ever a weekend to kind of go and check out NASCAR, this is it. Between the pageantry and the fact that they're in Charlotte, which is kind of, the Israel of NASCAR, as I like to call it, the homeland. It's where everything happens. It's where all the race teams are based out of. Oh, what did that get you guys?
Oh man! After the Crusades comment last week, we're just really hitting on all religion.
I'm just gonna rip through the Holy Land podcast by podcast. Whether or not we have one by the end of this is up to you. I don't understand.
Well, this weekend.
Well,
the IndyCar is at the Mecca, so it's
this is kosher for everyone on Memorial Day except for the hot dogs. Yeah. So.
I hope they're at least.
Like y'all said, Charlotte is the home. Well, that's for the grill master to find out, you to test it later. But obviously, with NASCAR being at the home track in Charlotte, that's a big thing for teams. But this is also kind of a reset point. You're 13 races down in the regular season, 13 to go. I feel like this is kind of a fitting point to kind of look at the season halfway before we get to the playoffs here. Hendricks kicked everyone's ass. Can we agree on that? That's the one thing I think that we can just all shake our heads and say, yes, that's at least par for the course here.
Yeah.
Toyota
hold on. You
needs
said
to wake up.
13 races. Yes. But you said 13 races into the season, right, Bob? So that's 13
yes.
on track. That's 13 on track incidents with Ross Chastain that we've had this year.
On average, something like that. It would play out to be, yes, sir.
Yeah, that seems about right. But yeah, Evan, you touched on it, and I'm going to let you have it because the Toyotas do need to wake up. But your rant feels more spirited than mine, so let it rip, buddy.
Look, 2311 has been the better Toyota team, which good for 2311, good for MJ, good for Denny, good for Bubba, good for love Tyler Reddick too. But hey, Gibbs, wake the hell up. Ty Gibbs isn't an asshole anymore. So thank you. At least someone's grandson isn't a dick. He's quietly put together a nice season. Martin Truex Jr. has a race win, but feels a little underwhelming. Denny Hamlin has been downright disappointing, I think you could say. And Christopher Bell, though consistent, he hasn't won yet. And I think that's a disappointment too. So you're looking at Toyota, and they're going to be adding a fleet here. I think that's important for them to get more data, get more talking points within teams. But I think Toyota, they're getting crushed right now. And frankly, Ford's not doing – Ford, when it comes to running races, it's Chevy right now. It's Chevy's up front, Trackhouse is up front, Hendricks up front. Those are the guys that week in, week out you can trust to be up there. And frankly, I think that the other two manufacturers are a little behind this year, but Toyota has been a big disappointment. Just really not great.
No, 100%.
Yeah, I agree with the 2311 over Gibbs comment. I think that's pretty spot on. I do have to note, just because you're coming at him here, and you can have the floor after this. Christopher Bell did win a race. Evan, go fuck yourself. There is no Christopher Bell slander on this podcast.
You're right. I'm sorry.
No, sir.
I'm sorry. Sorry, Christopher. Please forgive me.
All I was going to say is
I'm sorry.
You touched on Ford, so we may as well. Gosh, Bob and Christopher Bell, man, just a match made in heaven. Who'd have thought? But at this point, it kind of feels like Ford, for whatever reason, decided to use the engine that was in my 2016 stolen Ford Fusion to race this year because they haven't had speed to catch a soul. I mean, if the only bright spot and the only and it's kind of sad to say is that if it wasn't for Kevin Harvick's retirement tour, I don't think we would have very many positive things to say about Ford. Period. I mean, yeah, Chase Briscoe kind of showed up last week and or was that last week or at Darlington? I can't remember. I just remember seeing Chase Briscoe finally flip a switch and have a little bit of speed, which was so discombobulating for me. I can't even remember what it was. So it just goes to show you how head and shoulders above Chevy has been to this halfway point of the season. Whether you want to put it on the louvers or whatever the heck you want to put it on, they're just straight kicking everybody's ass.
Give me the top 3 Ford drivers right now because Brad Keselowski is in that list.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think you got to go Logano, Keselowski probably. Blaney's consistency, I think you got to put him in there as well. And then
you got to win.
Is it Chris Buescher? I know. Oh, I know. Blaney, that's the one thing. He's like, is it Chris Buescher? Probably the 4th best Ford driver right now.
He
probably.
Harvick's up there too.
Kevin,
Harvick's
I'm sorry, Kevin.
Here.
I'm sorry. Kevin Harvick deserves to be in that list. Yeah, you're right. So Logano, Blaney, Harvick, and then Keselowski, Buescher, depending on who's running, probably one of the 2 RFK cars.
Just to see the progress RFK has made in such a short period of time, you could tell that Brad is back to not fixing culture. He's actually just racing, and that seems to be making all the difference. To be honest with you, just to kind of be able to focus on what's going on the track and not having to completely rebuild a race shop seems to have Brad Keselowski running around a little bit lighter this year. It's definitely a good story.
And that's the thing. You've got 9 winners. Obviously, 16 get in. So there's going to be, as of right now, 7 people pointed in. I imagine that changes in the next 13 races. But until then, there's 7 spots up for grabs. RFK's got both in. And Keselowski's 95 points in as of now. Buescher's 59 in. I mean, they're 13th and 14th right now. They've set themselves up not just to rely on winning races here, but they're running on pure speed and consistency. And they haven't had a lot of DNFs. That's really been a big deal for them. But if it comes down to, I don't think you're gonna have 17 winners this year in the regular season or 16, however many it was. There's gonna be spots up for grabs, and at the rate they're rolling at RFK, they're gonna get at least 1 in, if not 2.
I 100% agree. I mean, Chris Buescher is not talked about enough either. If you put Chris Buescher in a more competitive car, and frankly, RFK's been competitive this year, but I mean, you put him in a top team. I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be a race winner and a potential top 12 finisher in the point standings. He's got that much, I think, driving fortitude. I don't necessarily know if talent's the right word, but he knows how to get the car around the track, which is worth a lot more than I think people realize. So I think that's really interesting. But I think the other thing is, too, I just have to say it. If you have the most, if there would ever be a situation, let's say Ross Chastain runs away with the points this year, which right now it's him and Kyle Larson and everybody else. There's no way on planet Earth Ross Chastain shouldn't be in the playoffs. Eliminate the fact that it's Ross Chastain. Let's pretend it's Bobby. Okay? If you finish first in the points, I don't give a damn if someone won 20 races. You deserve to be in the playoffs. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. can lick my butt, okay? You won a freaking crapshoot that is the Daytona 500. Congrats. Finish in the top 15 any other week, and I'll maybe give you a spot in the playoff. But, I mean, that's the one thing I got a problem with. I love the fact that we incentivize winning because I think it was becoming a problem. But at the same time, I'm sorry. Winning a plate race on the first week of the year does not mean you should be one of the 16 last drivers racing for a championship, in my opinion.
I can't disagree, and it like you said, it would take a lot for that to happen. I'm looking at the cutoff line right now. If it's a guy like Ross Chastain, yeah, he's 160 points to the good right now. Chase Briscoe's the guy that's the last man in right now at 16. Him and Bubba Wallace are Bubba's 23 above the cut line, and Briscoe's 5. But you look at the 4 guys that are out as of right now. Bowman's 5 out, Suarez 13 out, Ty Gibbs sneaky. He's had some runs now. He's only 15 out, and Austin Cindric is free falling now. He's at 27 out. Out of those 4, Bowman's finally got his back together. He's going to be back this weekend at St. Louis, which, by the way, or at Charlotte. By the way, I have to mention, not sure if either of you saw it, but NASCAR had a snarky little tweet today. It was an Alex Bowman comeback hype video, and the caption was, "No commercial here, but we're excited to have you back, Alex." The shade after the Chase Elliott commercial. Just basically, we get it. We know you're not as much of a big deal, but we're going to acknowledge you're back. So welcome back, Alex. Thought that was a nice little toast from NASCAR. But again, Bowman, Suarez, Gibbs, Cindric are your next 4 out. Out of those 4 guys, who has the best chance, do you guys think, out of those 4 to probably upseed either Briscoe or Wallace or even Chris Buescher if he starts to, throw together a couple DNFs here?
I mean, that's tough. I'm going to be honest. I think just the speed the Trackhouse has had, I think you got to put a little bit of gusto behind Suarez. I'm just going to say, I don't know. I think there's a lot of tracks that are coming up on the schedule that may or may not be able to get him a win. Definitely get him some top finishes. And he's in good equipment. You know that he's got good data because of what they've been able to do at Trackhouse in such a short period of time. I don't know. I think that this is the year where Daniel Suarez makes the step. I think he, gets into the chase and maybe even does a little bit of damage. I know he's been quiet for the start of the year, but I could really see him making a run late into this year.
I think that the number one person that is going to take a spot is not even on that list. It's Chase Elliott. He's going to win a race.
Evan.
He's going to.
You're a mind reader. That was the next step. Well done.
He's going to win a race. It's just going to happen. Let's be honest. Hendrick has dominated. Josh Berry put that car in the top 10 a couple times. Chase Elliott's going to get it across the finish line first. But if you want to get weird, there's a lot of road courses coming up, and Austin Cindric's pretty good on road courses. So if you want to get weird, you want to get weird at the Indy road course, you want to get weird on the streets of Chicago, Austin Cindric could steal a spot, if you want to use that term. But I think Suarez, if you're going to say if you got to point your way in, I think Suarez, frankly, Bubba's been impressive. This has been Bubba's strongest season yet, I think, for the first if you took a synopsis of the first 13 races, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Bubba point his way in either, but I actually think both Suarez and Bubba will win a race. I think that they'll take care of that on their own. I think they'll get a win this year.
That cut line will just start getting slow and slower, tighter.
So Evan said a name really quickly in that analysis that got a little bit buried. Haha. It's Josh Berry. I mean, kind of the only little bit of silly season we have to the halfway point of this season. We know that he is going to be electively driving a Ford next year. Bob, what say you about that decision? Because it seemed like Josh Berry kind of held his own ticket as a fellow Hendersonville native. What can you expect for the future of Josh Berry's racing career if the jump is finalized to Ford?
Yeah, obviously once he signed with Kevin Harvick Incorporated for his, agent, felt like the dominoes were starting to align there, and it was kind of the worst kept secret in the garage. But yeah, between Joseph Newgarden and Josh Berry, now Hendersonville, Tennessee will have a driver in the main series of NASCAR and IndyCar. Not a big deal. Just have to point that out there. No Hendersonville racer on this podcast. But you got to love seeing a guy like Josh Berry who hasn't been the career pathway that most people take, where they start young, they have funding, and they make their way up slowly. This guy was in iRacing with Dale Jr. He wasn't even full-time racing 5, 6, 7 years ago, and he stuck with it. He's a guy that has a short track background. When he was given an opportunity, not only in the Junior Motorsports 8 the last few years, but now in the Hendrick cars, whichever, the 48, the 9, guy's taken the opportunity and made the most of it. And it's a great story because it's not just the new NASCAR where it's, this guy's got funding and this guy's the hot prospect. A Zane and Chandler Smith would have been easy to throw in that 4 car. But you get someone like Josh Berry who's got the experience, who's ready to win now. May not be a championship threat right away, but he's a veteran that can lead that team when guys like Almirola and Harvick aren't there anymore. Chase Briscoe's 25, 26. He's young. He may be the face of that team as far as competitiveness, but he needs a veteran driver in his ear. And having a guy like Josh Berry in that garage, I think, is going to be an asset. May not bring a lot of money on the sponsorship side, but that's what Stewart-Haas is for. And I think you said a couple weeks ago, if any team can self-fund a car besides Hendrick, it's Haas. So that's something very interesting to watch moving forward too.
Yeah, I mean,
Evan, what
Josh
say you?
Berry. I told Bobby earlier today in an Instagram DM, I love the fact that we're not just going with the young guys anymore. Hey, this guy's worked hard. Let's throw him a bone. Let's let's give him a shot. I think that's good for the sport. It's good to prove to guys that it's worth to keep with it. Because there are guys that like Josh Berry that might not have got started until they were in their mid to late 20s. There are other guys that are still out there slugging around, and hey, it could be you. And I think that helps with the lower series, and I think that helps with competitiveness as well. I think that it makes the sport more well-rounded, and I think it makes some of the drivers a little more relatable. Like, let's be honest, Ty Gibbs isn't relatable. Austin Dillon, Ty Dillon, they're not relatable. They are racing because of their, like, even Chase Elliott, who is talented, is not relatable. These Josh Berry, that's like a relatable, like that's like a, you talk about like grassroots and like pageantry, like that's what people want. They want someone that is easy to get behind. And Josh Berry is no one's going to ever be like, oh, that bratty ass Josh Berry, spinning people out again. That's what's crazy about Ross Chastain. Ross Chastain is that, but because he can't, keep his bumper off of, he's a serial bump assaultist, that's the problem, But those guys are good for the sport. I think they're better for the sport than even sometimes even the little more talented guys that had an easier upbringing.
I would rather see someone like Josh Berry in that 4 car than a Harrison Burton who's not ready and may have the funding. I think you're going to see a lot more competitive ride with Josh Berry there for sure.
How many drivers like that have we? John Hunter Nemechek finally getting back with it in the Xfinity series. Like, how many guys that we just throw in the Cup Series because their dad had money, and frankly, it's like a quarterback. It's no different than an NFL quarterback starting too early.
Yeah. I mean, the other name that kind of comes to my mind when you think about guys that they've kind of gotten a shot is Ryan Preece. I mean, that's just another guy who kind of had his first chance and then stuck around, had to figure out how to, didn't have a ton of funding and had to figure out, how do I get back into a car? And lo and behold, Stewart-Haas again. It seems like they're making a conscious decision to kind of keep more mature drivers around their garage. I'm very interested to see if it works out.
And you look at even Preece's car, a lot of the funding is through Haas Tooling. A lot of times that's the primary sponsor on that car. So they're not, I don't think, what's the word here? They're not, blinded to the fact that some of these drivers they're bringing in aren't funded well, but they have the, on-track skill, and Gene Haas has the pocketbook that they can outweigh it, where, a team like Gibbs or, someone else may not be able to afford as much. Because, I mean, even in the Toyota camp, guys like Trevor Bayne and, maybe not necessarily a Ryan Truex because he's been around for so long, but you look at like Sammy Smith, there's guys in that Toyota pipeline that can be Cup drivers. There's no room. And it's the same way in the Cup Series in general. There's only so many seats here, and F1's even worse. That's why you see a lot of those guys come to IndyCar. There's only so many seats in the garage here, and, only so many generational talents can stick, and some guys get pushed out early, some guys stay too long, and then you get a Ty Dillon in the middle of it all. So it's a lovely dynamic when it all mixes out.
And we talked about economics a little bit earlier, and that's just unfortunately, what racing is. The 20 most talented drivers are not in Formula One, just because some guys can afford funding. Whatever you want to say, the 100 best, there's roughly 100 drivers in Cup, Xfinity, and Craftsman's truck. Theirs aren't necessarily the 100 best drivers either. They got a better chance because there's 100 or so seats. But unfortunately, you got to pay the bills. And that's just the sad fact about it is only so many drivers can be paid drivers. And we see that in all kinds of motorsports. A lot of these drivers aren't making a lot of money because they're paying, they're having to pay their way into the team. And for instance, in IndyCar, there's only probably 7 or 8 drivers that actually have a salary. Everyone else is paying for their ride. So it's tough out there, and NASCAR is no different. And you're seeing that now. This whole thing with the teams and the revenue, and it could blow up. I mean, it could. It's like the debt ceiling issue for NASCAR. It could really alter the way we view racing.
The
No,
economy
I'm
always
with ya.
rears its ugly head into racing. I don't know how it does it, but money is the way that the world works, isn't it, Ad? I guess that's just how it works.
TV will be interesting
make it
too. You
trickle.
got the new TV deal. So,
No,
In a,
NASCAR's at a crossroads when it comes to all this different financial and economic things. It really is going to be an interesting next couple of years because we're on the precipice of bringing NASCAR back from kind of its rut that it fell into the last 5 years or so, and it seems like motorsports as a whole, is starting to trend up in North America again. That's exciting, and NASCAR has to be at the forefront of that. They've got to figure out a way, one way or another, to not get passed up by F1, not get passed up by IndyCar. I think F1's definitely the more worry just because the Netflix
you don't have to
and the
worry
hype
about
and the
IndyCar.
glitz and glamour behind
Yeah,
it. Yeah, I don't think IndyCar is. Yeah, I saw those Peacock ratings. It's not. It was not needed. So, figure we'll wrap this up here in a second. But obviously, Memorial Day weekend coming up. It's a big weekend for racing, and we broke down halfway through the point of the NASCAR regular season. Evan and Adam, I need some hot takes real quick here. Obviously, some winners. We'll get to that, but one hot take for the regular season that we have not seen for the NASCAR yet, whether it's a winner, a team maybe making some strides here, maybe Ford finally figures it out. What's something that we can look forward to here?
ooh, Evan, go take this one because I don't think I'm quite ready for a hot take. I got to figure it out. I got to put
Ross
one in, I got to
Chastain
put one in the
becomes the
chamber.
most Ross Chastain becomes the most controversial champion ever after he spins Kyle Larson in Phoenix to win the championship.
Ow. Oh my God. Can you imagine? I need the Cliff Daniels audio, the radioactive right now.
And it would be a move that if anyone else did it, they wouldn't think twice. But because it's Ross, it will be the firestorm of the century.
Wow.
So this is going to be my hot take of all hot takes. And it sounds crazy, but hear me. I think Chase Elliott's going to miss the playoffs, guys. I know you guys think I'm crazy, but given his performances earlier in the year before he broke his leg, he was not racing well. And I think that's the thing that this injury is kind of erased a little bit of, is that he was having a terrible start to this year. Literally looked like a fish out of water in the car. I mean, obviously comes back at Darlington and ends up in the top 10 with, a little bit of a crapshoot there. But I don't know. It just feels like with everything that Hendrick has going on, I think, here's my thing. He's going to have to beat either Kyle Larson or William Byron, who have both been lights out this year, to win a race. Because at the end of the day, they're going to either, if he's in a position to win a race, they're probably going to be in a position to win the race too. So I'm just curious, because obviously I understand that Chase Elliott is a premier talent in the sport. It just feels like this year isn't shaking up for him. It doesn't feel like it's going to shake out for him. I'm not sure what NASCAR would even do with that. But I think if there's ever a year where Chase Elliott could miss the playoffs, this would be it.
They would find a way to say that there was another Michael Waltrip racing incident and they had to kick 7 teams out of the playoff because God forbid Chase Elliott. They'll put Michael McDowell's ass in the playoff with Chase Elliott just to get Chase in. Ryan Preece,
that's my other
it's your
hot
lucky
take.
day.
That's my other hot take. Michael McDowell's going to punch Ty Gibbs. I feel it. I feel it in my bones. I feel it deep in my bones.
The crusade will begin.
And then
The
afterwards,
crusade will begin. This will be a holy war.
After that, all three will hold hands at chapel the next weekend with Joe Gibbs.
It's going to be a lovely hegetsus.com ad. I cannot wait for that. I gotta mention though, because I kind of like what you're saying about Chase Elliott there. When we were kind of talking about the standings there, None of y'all said Alex Bowman would make it in, and he's only 5 points out. He's coming back this week. I actually have some faith in that 48 team because least we forget, before he broke his back dirt racing, and even with a 25-point penalty that should have been 100 points, but that's neither here nor there, he was the regular season points leader. I mean, the guy was rolling hot. So I really would not be shocked to see that 48 team get in over the 9 if anyone. And yeah, like you said, everyone is assuming Chase Elliott's just going to win one of these road courses. One of my hot takes is it's going to be a guy like AJ Allmendinger, a Michael McDowell, a Ty Gibbs, an Austin Cindric. One of those guys is going to be the person that steals one of these Chicago street course, these Watkins Glens, these Indy Rovals that we're still doing because, why not? I can't wait to see the turn 1 carnage there as well. I mean, it's just going to be a shit show. But I think somebody's going to steal one of those races. I do.
2 things. Alex Bowman will win a race before Chase.
Agreed.
I actually think Alex Bowman's got a chance this weekend. If he's feeling up to it, if he's feeling physically ready to do it, I think he's got as good a chance as any. But I actually think this weekend is maybe both of their best chances before Chase gets to a road course. But that's the other thing with road course racing now. It's not just, AJ Allmendinger is a, road course ringer. Chase Elliott, Tyler Reddick is a road course racer now. Martin Truex Jr. loves to race on road courses, has been good. Kyle Larson, he won at Sonoma, I think 2 years. Has he won 2 years in a row now? So you got these guys. Mm-hmm. It's no longer, the said heads. Suarez. But the said heads, you don't have said heads anymore because the regulars can race on road courses. Christopher Bell is another guy who can wheel it on a road course.
Yeah.
I'm just excited to kind of figure out, just the different beefs that kind of pop up in NASCAR and stuff like that. I'm just excited to see if we have any more on-track incidents, maybe some that don't involve Ross Chastain, because at this point we understand that if you come at Ross, you're probably going to get at least a 1-piece with a biscuit, possibly a 2-piece. And I think the rest of the garage kind of took note of it. So I don't think Ross will be the one who ends up getting punched, but I don't know. I think Ty Gibbs is on the short list in my head at least. We'll see. But an interesting year to this.
It's going to be interesting to see though, because it feels like every week, and this is compared to last year where the racing was a lot more of the storyline, feels like the off-track drama has picked up this year in NASCAR for whatever reason. I don't know if emotions have just kind of boiled over with the next gen car and all the fines, or if Ross has just got everyone in their feelings. But it feels like the off-track intensity has picked up and it's taken it on track.
I think they finally figured out the car. They finally figured out the car enough to where they can yell at each other off the track and bitch and moan at each other because they finally figured out how to drive the damn thing.
I know you guys have covered the Ross, Noah Gragson stuff. But just 2 things about it. 1, Chase Elliott was a little bitch for what he said. If you want to fight his ass, go fight his ass with your broken leg, buddy. 2, I was proud of Ross because I kind of thought Ross would run away. And, I mean, look, Noah Gragson, if anyone needs to get punched, it's Noah Gragson. Noah Gragson deserved to get punched before Ross Chastain. And Ross Chastain, people forget, Noah Gragson literally could have killed somebody at Road America last year. He has no business being the one to, if Kevin Harvick wanted to go over there and try to fight Ross, power to you, Kevin. Even William Byron at this point. But Noah Gragson, know your role, know your lane. That wasn't it. But I think what will be really interesting too is I'd love to see Kevin Harvick get into one more. Kevin Harvick and Denny Hamlin rolling on the front stretch at a race would be my. Just please.
I need him to do the roof jump onto Greg Biffle just one more time. I don't know how, if it's possible, but maybe SRX this summer. Kevin Harvick gets into a beef with someone. I'm here for it.
Haley,
the Kevin Harvick jump,
slapping each other.
I'll say this: the Kevin Harvick dive onto Greg Biffle's car is second in my mind only to Kurt Angle jumping off the TNA Impact stage onto Abyss. Just Kurt Angle, just full front flip onto.
I was gonna say that was not Olympic gold medalist Kurt Angle. That was Perk Angle.
There's videos on Instagram.
Well, he had
Bobby
a broken
sends
neck.
them to me. I send them to Bobby. Apparently Adam's in on this now too. where people are hitting each other with fluorescent light bulbs. At the end of the year, I would love to see a steel cage death match in Phoenix, middle of the track, Ross Chastain in there, unlimited fluorescent light bulbs. And if you want to get in there and take your shot, you get a chance. First one to defeat Ross gets 10 playoff points next year.
Oh my gosh, guys, I did it.
What Evan is talking about. It's called Kings Road Wrestling on Instagram, and it is the most absolutely insane videos. I'm upset that we didn't do Adam's bachelor party at one of these events, to be honest.
I think I just did it, fellas. I figured out how we can fairly decide who gets the last playoff spot if there's no winner. We don't have 16 winners. I believe we need an all-field Royal Rumble with the remaining drivers that aren't qualified for the playoffs. We'll pick a stadium every year, and it will be chaos. It will be the mods and mufflers match. I don't know what we'll call it, but we'll figure it out eventually.
Fuck on Casey Kane! Casey Kane! Oh my god!
It's like Casey Kane's music!
Oh my god. AJ Allmendinger's just beating everyone's ass.
My god, Tony Stewart killed him!
Which ex-driver would you like to see in that scenario?
Well, I've got one with a real killer instinct who I think would do a really good job in the ring. I just don't know.
I don't trust Kurt Busch's. I don't trust Kurt's head to hold up, though.
I don't know.
Honestly,
everyone else kind of
probably Jimmy Spencer. Good luck getting his fat ass out of the ring. Good luck with that.
One of my favorite Jimmy Spencer
if Rikishi
stories.
can be eliminated.
My dad went to the Brickyard one year, and they were hanging out at the race track, whatever the hell they called that show back in the day, with Kenny Wallace and John Roberts. And my dad said that during a commercial break, Jimmy Spencer got up and berated a producer of the show because they were out of Krispy Kremes. And he said, if you don't give me a fucking box of Krispy Kremes in the next 10 minutes, I am going to go fucking apeshit on this set. And that's a true story.
Mr. Excitement, baby.
That's a true story.
You know what? On that note, I don't think we've left much meat on the bone here, fellas. Does anybody have any last thoughts before we take this thing too far off the rails?
No, Ad. I'm excited for this weekend. For our listeners, if Sunday night's episode is a little discombobulated, I'm sorry. I'm going to a wedding, and the plan right now is a drunk podcast for Bob and a sober podcast for Adam. So, we'll see. But just for our viewers, that if you're just shocked at what you hear on Sunday night, it's not my fault. That's the liquor talking.
Real quick, a little. If you're looking to throw money, go ahead. I'm sorry, Adam.
I'm listening. No, I'm listening. You said money. Go ahead.
If you're looking to throw money, Sergio Perez, Alex Palou, Kyle Larson. I think I think Kyle's the hottest hand. And if you let's say you don't want to go for Kyle, that's fine. I think that's acceptable because he can't win every race. Maybe throw some money on someone I think that we talked about earlier as having a great year, and it's William Byron. I think Hendrick is going to continue to dominate. So maybe sprinkle a little money on both those Hendrick cars and Palou. Sergio Perez wins every street circuit in Formula One. It's a done deal. And he also loves countries that are rich and don't celebrate human rights. I don't know what Monaco's human rights situation is, but they certainly have a lot of money.
It's small enough that I think it's all in the family, so I think you can get away with slapping your kid a time or two.
That's showbiz,
actually,
baby.
Cody Ware is going to join us next week to talk about that. So.
Oh, actually, that's the plan next week. We're in Gateway in Evan's hometown, so we're instead of Kenny Wallace live, we're gonna have Cody Ware live at Evan's house. So, can't wait for that podcast next week. Looking forward to it. The 51 on the track, 36th on the track, 51 in our hearts. The Rick Ware rocket driven by Cody Ware. Goodness gracious,
earlier,
we've gone off the rails. Oh, if they only knew what we say in the pre-show. Goodness gracious. Well, Evan, as our first ever repeat guest, I gotta thank you, my friend. It's always a pleasure talking racing off the mic, but somehow on the mic it's even more fun with you three or with us three. So, always a pleasure, my
Thank you
friend.
so much. It's a joy to come on and chop it up. I don't have a lot of people to chop it up with, so it's always good to get that opportunity.
Amen, brother.
I'm sure we could probably do
We'll
this
be-
for another 3 hours, and we probably wouldn't even get too much further in.
Nope,
No.
not even a little bit. So before my computer just kind of melts at the thought of processing a 3-hour podcast, go ahead and like on Sunday night. We'll bring you everything that happened. Comment, subscribe, share this wherever you can. It's a great weekend for racing. It's a great weekend to be listening to this podcast. So check back in with us on the long day of racing. And well, this was Breaking Balls, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks, Pat Tillman.
Pat Tillman, stand up.